Can you talk to me as to why some of the Silicon Valley names, these startup ventures, are now looking towards SPACs as an option? It used to be apparently a fairly shunned process for Silicon Valley names, but now very much part of the big mix for boards, which I find quite staggering if you look at some of the IPOs and how well they've done. IPOs that have tripled since last year. Why would an entrepreneur want to bring a company that they've founded to a SPAC instead of taking it on the standalone IPO process?
Sure. There's a couple of phenomena at work there. First of all, the SPAC structure, which exploded last year, it's not really a coincidence. We were actually on the podium of the New York Stock Exchange exactly a year ago today, and it was the day after the pandemic was declared. So market dropped 2,400 points at my fingertips, so hopefully that won't happen today for everyone. But we all went home and we had a couple of months where everyone was a deer in headlights. However, what happened after that was that entrepreneurs and founders of technology companies and other high growth companies realized that the SPAC structure allowed them to do something a traditional IPO doesn't allow you to do, which is to share the projections regarding the future, because you're not actually doing a public listing when you're merging with a SPAC. You are merging an existing private company, and you're free to speak about the future in your merger negotiation with a SPAC. So when you have a year like last year where COVID made everything very uncertain about 2020, and you wanted to start talking about what was going to happen post-COVID, you couldn't do that in a regular IPO, and you could do it in a SPAC merger. So you'd be able to speak about the pro forma 2021, 2022 type of trajectory. Of course, once that happened, a lot of venture capitalists and entrepreneurs also realized if they had business plans that had defensible projections that went out further, they could take a look at 23, 24, 25. In my opinion, that's only valid if you have some fairly robust assumptions that can be diligenced and some contracts, commercial partnerships, things that give you a good sense for what that future looks like. But the bottom line is you could not do any of this in an IPO because of the regulations. And that's really what has led Silicon Valley to embrace the SPAC structure.
What's jumped out to me has been how quickly other exchanges, other international cities are trying to catch up to the United States, where they've seen what's happened in New York and said, we want part of the action on SPACs. Are there any clear advantages that the US has, or do you see other markets being able to play a very competitive role with SPACs?
Well, I think the advantage in the US of a SPAC over an IPO in the US is probably most stark because of the regulation that I mentioned around a US IPO and the lack of a safe harbor for forward-looking projections. So the structure around, or the regulatory regime around private placements and M&A, which allows for forward-looking statements, offers a very stark advantage over a US listing. I think if you think about other listings, it'll really depend on what are the rules in those listings and what are the rules that are going to govern SPACs in those listings, and how different are the IPO rules than the SPAC rules in each of those jurisdictions. And I really can't speak to each one overseas, but I would imagine that there are probably going to be disparate outcomes depending on the regulatory regimes in each one. I would add to that just the number of US companies that have the sort of growth profile that is attractive to investors who participate in SPAC transactions. It's obviously a larger number of companies that have the sort of growth profile as well as the market cap size. You're really looking for companies that are typically in that unicorn status of $1 billion or more with a high growth profile. And there are more of those in the US than there are overseas, although we certainly are seeing some overseas who are trying to come and list in the US markets to take advantage of the structure here.